Hello and welcome to this episode of Bullseye, my regular interaction with you where I go deep into issues of significance and give you our take on what an ongoing story or a development actually means for Goa and Goans. This is in Goa and I'm Ajay Gupta. Today we are going to discuss a topic which in Goa has not yet gone deep into. The major fire that happened at this nightclub in Arpora called BIRCH by Romeo Lane. And this particular nightclub is not only controversial, but the fire that killed 25 people on the 6th of December 2025 was bad enough on its own. But the real takeaway from the BIRCH fire is that how Goa's governance was on fire, how Goa's governance burned more than the nightclub that took 25 lives. And it is the burning of Goa's governance with regard to the illegal licensing and the protection that it gives to nightclub owners, 90% of them from outside Goa, to carry on their businesses absolutely illegally, covered by a blanket of legality, so-called legality, by the issuance of different NOCs and permissions which could not have been issued under any circumstances. And this is the kind of illegality which dominates Goa's nightlife permissions, completely protected by local MLAs, by people in the government, and aided and abetted by a system of the Panchayat, the Goa Pollution Control Board, the fire department and all of them, who all together collude to ensure that this illegality functions in a so-called legal way. So this is not just about the murder of 25 people in Birch Lane, it's a murder of the system. And why am I suddenly bringing up this story now? It is not sudden. It is important because the Bombay High Court on the 18th of August 2026, a few days ago, cancelled the bail of Saurabh Luthra, Gaurav Luthra and Ajay Gupta, the owners of Birch Lane. They rejected the Sessions Court order which set them free or gave them bail, and have told them to surrender to be arrested. And that is the reason why we thought it appropriate to tell you the inside story, not just of the Birch Lane fire, that everybody knows what happened, but a deep systematic analysis of how this is not just only Birch Lane or Birch by Romeo Lane, sorry, that's what it's called, but this is a pattern and a template for illegal permissions given to nightclubs all across Goa, especially owned by the rich and the powerful from outside Goa. Now, that is what today's Bullseye is about, because this particular incident on December 6, 2025 cannot be reduced to just a story of one unsafe performance, one missing fire extinguisher, because the evidence points to something far more disturbing. An illegal structure standing in a salt pan was given a documentary identity by the government, supplied with water and electricity licenses, granted a trade license on visibly manipulated papers, documents, allowed to continue after that license expired, issued an extraordinarily long Pollution Control Board consent till 2031, granted an excise license on the strength of allegedly forged clearances and permitted to function without a valid fire department NOC. This is the sad and sordid story of Birch Lane, of Birch by Romeo Lane. See, the Bombay High Court's August 18, 2026 decision cancelling the bail of Saurabh Luthra, Gaurav Luthra and Ajay Gupta brings back the case to its essential point. The court found that the Sessions Court, as I just mentioned, failed to identify the enormity of the offence, the deliberate disregard of safety norms, and the unauthorized nature of the structure on which the club was running, and the conduct of the accused after the fire. The larger question, however, is how Birch was allowed to come into existence, this nightclub, how it acquired licenses, why it was permitted to continue even after its trade license expired, and what has happened, importantly, to the officials and departments whose actions enabled this illegality to continue. And that is important. The government, after this fire, instituted a 4-member magisterial inquiry on December 8, 2025. It was headed by the North Goa Collector and District Magistrate Ankit Yadav. Its other members were the South Goa Superintendent of Police, Tikam Singh Verma, Director of Forensic Science, Ashutosh Apte, and Deputy Director of Fire and Emergency Services, Rajendra Haldankar. This was the team. Now, the government, of course, the government initially asked them to give this report within a week. This deadline was unrealistic, undoubtedly, but the committee completed its work in a fortnight and submitted its report on 23rd December 2025. It was a 108-page report with 500 pages of annexures. Now, the findings of this inquiry is also important and should be taken into account. But before we do that, let us look at the illegality of Birch, which did not begin or end on the day of the fire. Birch was operated by a company called Being GS Hospitality Goa Arpora LLP, whose partners were Saurabh Luthra, Gaurav Luthra and Ajay Gupta. On November 28, 2023, the LLP entered into an agreement with the original owner of the property, Surinder Kumar Khosla, for this premises at in Agor in Sankwadi, Arpora, spread over about 31,200 square meters. Now, the magisterial inquiry traced this construction back to 1998-99. The hexagonal structure, according to the inquiry findings, used for Birch stood in the middle of a salt pan or a water body on land of survey numbers 158/0 and 159/0. No process had been initiated to convert this relevant portion of land from agricultural to non-agricultural use. It remained a salt pan. These structures were therefore illegal from its very inception. Construction in the salt pan violates section 32 of the Goa Land Revenue Code, as well as all the coastal zone regulations. Therefore, one must also take into account that building plans and a conversion sanad and an occupancy certificate were absent as far as this property was concerned. Birch was therefore not a legal entity, or not, the nightclub was not legal at all. But this story goes even deeper. We will tell you how official papers were manufactured and given to Birch to give it a semblance of legality. The Arpora Nagua Village Panchayat issued the property owner an NOC for an electricity connection on December 21st, 2022, and an NOC for a water connection on the same day, and an NOC to what was described as repairs on March 25th, 2023. These are the 3 NOCs given by the Panchayat. Now, the inquiry found a much wider pattern in this overall property, broadly known as the Maison Lakeview Resort property. Now, house numbers and trade licenses and water licenses were given to 13 shops constructed on this land. And this land was basically salt pan, paddy field and water body. So therefore, what was presented as a repair activity was actually a construction of new structures without any plans. Therefore, the panchayat is the biggest culprit as far as this is concerned. Now we come to the most glaring example of illegality. House number 502 by 1-RT8. The inquiry found that this house number itself on which Birch functioned was fictitious and could not be identified at the site. On a fictitious house number. The trade license application contained the words house number 502 by 1-RT8 bar and nightclub. The trade license application contains this number, house number, which itself is fictitious. Added in a different ink and in an available blank space. House number added later in a different ink and in a very conveniently created blank space. Therefore, the inquiry described this document as having visible signs of forgery, and the insertion appeared to have been made later. Therefore, this unauthorized house structure without an identifiable civic record could conveniently move through the licensing system, but it should not have been allowed to do. Now then, the Panchayat Secretary Raghuveer Borkar reportedly admitted before the inquiry committee that he had not checked the house number before giving the trade license. This is not a harmless clerical omission. Verification of the premises was the very foundation upon which the licensing process depended. Tell me, do fellow Goans get these kind of liberties when they go to get their trade licenses? How many of you have managed to get trade licenses done without any inspection and in a manner like this? Ordinary Goans cannot do this. But powerful nightclub owners from Delhi, North India, anywhere else can get this done. Please mark this. Then let us come to the 5-day licensing process, how they got everything in 5 days. The application for Birch's establishment license was inwarded on December 11, 2023. The Panchayat passed a resolution on December 14, 2023. The final license to establish was granted on December 16, 2023 in 5 days. This license permitted them to run a bar, restaurant and a nightclub. The application was processed despite the presence of approved building plans, a construction license, an occupancy certificate, Form 114 land records, proper photographs of the premises, a verifiable house number, and other mandatory supporting documents. Can ordinary Goans ever get these kind of facilities? Therefore, based on the statements attributed to Bakkar and the then Sarpanch Roshan Redkar, it concluded that the procedural violations and failure to verify the records established very clearly the collusion with the property owners in keeping the restaurant running illegally. This was so clear. Now, this license that was issued, this establishment license, was valid till only March 31st, 2024. This was never renewed. Do understand, even this license was not renewed after March 31st, 2024. So when on the day Birch burnt, even this license was not with them. Let's take a note of that also. Therefore, for over 20 months, Birch by Romeo Lane was allowed to function illegally even after its establishment license had expired. Section 72 of the Goa Panchayat Raj Act allowed them to seal this business. They did not. There was a continuing silence. The club functioned. A dubious license obtained in 5 days became the gateway to nearly 2 years of illegal operation. Now let us look at the forged health certificate. The Kandoli Primary Healthcare Center and the officer there, Dr. Roshan Nazareth, told the committee that he had never issued the health certificate. Investigators allege that the authentic document containing the health officer's details and signature were scanned and reproduced to create a false health certificate. The same certificate was used to obtain the trade license, the excise license and other statutory permissions. After verification, the excise department lodged a complaint and the Mapsa police registered a separate FIR against the company and its principals. Investigators also identified allegedly a forged police clearance on NOC, reportedly issued by the Delhi police. The charge sheet also states that the police and the health department documents attached to this excise application were also forged. Now, this is the level of forgery. Can ordinary citizens ever manage to do this? Then comes the role of the Goa State Pollution Control Board. On April 22nd, 2024, after the Panchayat trade license had already expired, the GSPCB granted a license to BIRCH to operate under Water and Air Acts. Pollution Control Board is giving a license to operate after the trade license has already expired. The consent was valid up to January 31st, 2039 and described the restaurant as a seating capacity of 150 persons. Goa Pollution Control Board gives its NOC without a trade license up to 2039. This is where we are there. So this is shocking. Now, look at the extent of the legality one by one, what's happening. Now, let us look at the water issue. On the Central Groundwater Authority norm, 70 liters per restaurant seats, even 150 seats that this restaurant claimed it had, would require 10.5 kiloliters of water every day and generate about 8.4 kiloliters of wastewater. The actual venue capacity and footfalls were much more than this. But even under this obviously underreported capacity of BIRCH, they would require 70 liters per restaurant seat, which means 10.5 kiloliters of water every day and waste of 8.4 kiloliters. And that is under the unreported figure. The actual figure is much more. Therefore, the inquiry has recommended a scientific study of the water quality around the BIRCH site. We don't know when that is going to happen, but this is an important fact to be put. Finally, the Goa Pollution Control Board revoked BIRCH's consent on December 17th, 2025 after 25 people died. So it takes the death of 25 people for the Pollution Control Board to wake up and cancel the licenses. It suspended a scientific assistant Chaitanya Salgaonkar and junior engineer Vijay Harishchandra Kansekar. Why did the buck not stop at the chairman of the Pollution Control Board, the member secretary and all of them, and go up right up to the Minister for Environment under whom the Goa Pollution Control Board functions? A departmental inquiry is going on against a scientific assistant, a junior environmental engineer, and not against the bigwigs. And this is shocking. After 25 people died, Goa Pollution Control Board says we have sealed 14 other establishments for consent violations. So you need people to die for you to revoke consent. How could the Pollution Control Board issue consent up to 2039 to an establishment whose trade license had expired, whose structure had no lawful building foundation, whose declared capacity is misleading? The Goa Pollution Control Board itself is polluted in corruption. Now we come to the Directorate of Fire and Emergency Services. I'm going to target each and every department to tell you how they have failed Goans and have acted in an illegal, corrupt manner. Fire Department confirmed after the tragedy that BIRCH did not possess a valid Fire Department NOC. Excellent. Fire Department confirms, no, they did not. Then what were you doing? They had technical deficiencies. There was no functional fire detection and alarm system, no automatic sprinkler system, no smoke extraction system, inadequate basement ventilation, no proper emergency exit, inadequate emergency exit on the ground and deck levels, no properly trained staff, no adequate firefighting equipment, a narrow bridge and approach obstructing evacuation and emergency access, combustible roofing and decorative material. What was the fire department doing all these days? It had no idea. Then, if the fire department knew that this public venue lacked NOC, what mechanism existed to stop its operations? If it did not know, why were the Panchayat, Excise Department and other licensing authorities not required to digitally verify the fire clearance before granting or continuing their own permissions? It is not only shocking, but it shows the total government collusion to keep an illegal nightclub running. Now there was also demolition order. The Arpura Nagua Panchayat issued an order cum demolition on April 28, 2024. The property owner appealed and the Directorate of Panchayats granted them interim protection or status quo. In February 2026, the Additional Director of Panchayats finally dismissed the appeal and upheld the demolition order. And then they again went to a higher court. The Panchayat demolition I mentioned was on 24/2024. The Director of Panchayats granted protection to them. Additional Director of Panchayats upheld the demolition order. And then the district court granted a stay on this. So at every stage, BIRCH gets away. And this is the point. Now, look at the treatment after the inquiry was completed. The fire department, the Goa Pollution Control Board, as I mentioned, took action against lower ranking officials. Then, Raghuveer Bagkar was suspended from service, the Panchayat's official. Roshan Redkar was dismissed and barred from contesting elections for 5 years, the Sarpanch. 2 GSPCB field officers were suspended. Directorate of Panchayats Siddhi Halankar and GSPCB Member Secretary Shamila Montero were initially suspended. BIRCH's pollution consent was revoked, show cause notices were issued, and so on and so forth. While everybody else, lower ranking officials, are facing inquiry and are suspended, the 2 officers, the Director of Panchayats and the GSPCB Member Secretary, their suspensions got revoked by March 21st, 2026. The senior officers got their suspensions revoked. Look at the joke. Although the government said the department inquiries would go on, and the police charge sheet named Bagkar, Redkar amongst public officials, but Halankar and Montero, namely the GSPCB Member Secretary and the Director of Panchayats, their names were out. Then the Chief Minister said action would follow. Chief Minister Pramod Sawant said actions would follow against officials of the fire services and the excise. But no action has been visible till yet. The Chief Minister may kindly tell us what action he has taken. Now, it is in this background that one must look at why and how the High Court has finally cancelled the bail of the Luthra brothers and Ajay Gupta. Because it's said that the bail order given to them by the Sessions Court did not contain a word on the enormity of the offence. And that is a very serious charge that the High Court made observation. Now, the court also connected the absence of valid licenses to the unauthorized nature of the structure. Valid permissions would have required prescribed safety measures. Because there were no permissions, no safety measures were put. Therefore, the absence of those permissions were not a technical omission only. It was a part of a causal chain established. The Sessions Court had initially refused the bail and said that There is no flight risk. The Luthra brothers learnt about the fire and the deaths. They contacted a travel agent and at 1:13 a.m. on the same night flew to Phuket. They contacted the travel agent at night and then flew to Phuket by 5:25 a.m. They returned only after a non-bailable warrant was issued against them. So this is the whole story. Birch did not become legal. It was made to look legal by all our government departments. The forged house number, the forged health certificate, the police clearances, the panchayat initially helped them. The pollution control board supplied consent. The excise department supplied liquor license. The missing fire department NOC did not stop the business and the fire department looked the other way. The demolition proceedings did not stop it. Expired excise license did not stop them. Public complaints, of course, did not stop them. Only the fire and 25 deaths ultimately stopped them. And imagine if the fire and the 25 deaths had not happened, this illegal nightclub would have continued till eternity. But cancelling the bail is not the answer. It cannot become the substitute for exposing the entire chain that enabled them. The entire chain has to be exposed. This bail, cancellation of the bail cannot be seen as a stoppage of that exposure. One panchayat secretary and one sarpanch getting penalized cannot solve this. The idea here is not only should all the recommendations of the inquiry be allowed and followed, but criminal action should be taken against the top officials of the department and the minister, with the chief minister having to be personally accountable for this disaster. And that is important. The buck has to stop at the chief minister of Goa's door. The chief minister of Goa needs to answer because he is the head of the system, which has become so inefficient and completely allegedly corruption ridden. And instead of just saying that I'm going to take action against people, the finger should point at him also for allowing this to happen until and unless there is a series of criminal action against everybody down this chain, including the heads of departments and heads of ministers. Because this is not just about Birch. There are many Birches all over Goa, especially North Goa, and each of them is a product of illegality and corruption. This is the bullseye of today. Keep following us, keep supporting us. Thank you very much.